My name is Amelia Vance. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a landscape architect. The engraved crystal clinked against my wine glass, a sound so sharp it felt like a shard in my ear. My father, beaming, held it up. To Sarah, he announced, his gaze sweeping around the table, landing pointedly on me. And to the new owner of the lake house. My mother, seated beside him, squeezed my sister Sarah's hand, her eyes shining with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher, but it certainly wasn't sorrow. Sarah, 35, looked utterly radiant, a little too innocent, perhaps, as she held up a large, ornate iron key. The key. The very key that used to hang on a hook by the back door of the only place I'd ever truly considered home. My throat felt like sandpaper. My parents had just announced, casually, over a perfectly roasted chicken, that they had signed the deed to the lake house over to my sister, Sarah. And then, they'd looked at me, expecting me to lead the toast, to celebrate it. I managed a tight, brittle smile, raising my glass a fraction, but no sound came out. They wouldn't get the celebration they wanted from me, not like this. What they didn't understand yet was that this wasn't just about a house, it was about every unspoken promise, every forgotten effort, and it was about to change everything between us. To understand the weight of that moment, you need to know about the lake house, and about my family. The house wasn't just property, it was the anchor of our lives, especially mine. It had been my grandparents' summer retreat, a rustic, cedar-shingled cottage on the shores of Lake Superior, surrounded by towering pines and ancient birches. Every summer, from the time I was old enough to walk, I was there. My grandfather, a quiet man with hands stained by lake water and garden soil, taught me how to fish off the old wooden dock, how to identify constellations from the screened porch, and how to tell the difference between a white pine and a red pine. When he passed, the house went to my parents, and it became the constant in a childhood that sometimes felt a little too transient. I was the one who loved it fiercely. Sarah, 3 years younger, preferred the city, the mall, her friends. She'd visit for a week or two, complain about the bugs, and retreat to her phone. I, on the other hand, spent every waking hour exploring the woods, swimming in the icy water, and, as I got older, helping my dad with repairs. I learned to patch the roof, sand the dock, clear fallen branches, and even restain the porch myself when my parents were too busy or too tired. I studied landscape architecture in college, partly inspired by the wild beauty of that place. My parents always said, "Amelia, you're the one who understands this place. You're the one who cares." It wasn't an explicit promise of inheritance, but it was an undeniable implication. I poured my heart, my time, and often, my own modest savings into that house, believing I was investing in my future, in our family's future. I updated the septic system drawings, researched sustainable landscaping options for the shoreline, and even paid for a substantial portion of the dock's reconstruction after a particularly harsh winter 5 years ago, a check for $8,000 I'd written without a second thought, because it was our dock. That dinner, a week before Sarah's 36th birthday, was supposed to be a casual family get-together. My parents had called it a little celebratory meal, which, in hindsight, should have been a red flag. When my father made the announcement, the air in the dining room thickened. My mother explained, a little too quickly, that Sarah really needed a stable home for her and the baby, referring to my nephew, Leo, who was only 6 months old. Sarah and her husband, Mark, had been struggling. Mark had lost his job last year, and they'd been living in a cramped rental. My parents said they wanted to help Sarah get on her feet, and the lake house was the best way. "It's a gift, Amelia," my mother said, her voice soft but firm, as if preempting an argument. A fresh start for them. I managed to croak out a generic toast about new beginnings, my hand trembling slightly as I set the glass down. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just a house, it was the core of my identity, ripped away and handed to someone who had never truly valued it. The next morning, I drove directly to my parents' house, the knot in my stomach tighter than ever. I tried to be calm, to appeal to their sense of fairness. "Mom, Dad," I began, sitting across from them in their living room, "I don't understand. We've always talked about the lake house. I've put so much into it, not just emotionally, but financially. I paid for the dock, for half the new well pump 3 years ago, for all the landscaping after that storm. My father shifted uncomfortably. Amelia, those were things that needed doing. You always said you loved helping. My mother added, and we appreciated it, dear. But it was always our house. We never explicitly promised it to you. Sarah needs a leg up right now. You're established, Amelia. You have your own successful business, your own apartment. Sarah and Mark are struggling. Struggling doesn't mean you give away a family legacy that another child has poured their life into, I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it even. I thought my contributions were building towards something. I thought this was my future. My father sighed. It's a gift, Amelia. A generous gift. We expect you to be happy for your sister. He then brought up Sarah again, emphasizing her financial precarity, her new baby, the stress she was under. It was always about Sarah's needs, never mine. That detail mattered later. They truly believed they were being generous, and that I was being selfish. They simply couldn't see my perspective, or perhaps, chose not to. A few days later, Sarah called me, her voice bubbly. Hey, Amelia. So excited about the house. Mom and Dad said you'd be thrilled for me. Listen, I was wondering if you could come up next weekend. We're having a little housewarming, just family, and I could really use your eye for the garden. The hydrangeas look a bit sad, and you know everything about that soil. There it was. The explicit ask to celebrate it. Not only did they give her the house I had a claim to, but they expected me to show up, smile, and offer my expertise to make her new acquisition even better. It was a fresh slap in the face. I told her I had a prior engagement, a vague excuse, but she didn't seem to notice or care. She just rattled on about her plans for a new paint color in the living room and how she was thinking of taking down the old bookshelf my grandfather had built. That bookshelf. It held all his old fishing journals and nature guides. My heart ached. I spent the next few weeks in a daze, the betrayal a constant hum beneath the surface of my daily life. I pulled out old bank statements, faded receipts, and even scanned through my email archives. I found the invoice for the well pump repair, paid directly by me. I found the receipt for the custom-made cedar planks for the dock. I found records of property taxes I'd covered when my parents had cash flow issues, totaling over $3,000 in one particular year. I even found a text exchange with my mother from 4 years ago where I'd offered to pay for a new water heater, and she'd replied, "That would be wonderful, Amelia. You're such a blessing, always looking out for the house." The total wasn't astronomical in the grand scheme of a multi-generational property, but it was significant for me, a young professional building her business. Over the years, I calculated, I had directly contributed over $45,000 in documented expenses and materials, not including countless hours of labor. What I didn't understand yet was the full picture. I started doing some digging, not through anything illegal, but through public records. I looked up my parents' property records, their general tax assessments. I noticed a few things. Their primary residence, while comfortable, had a significant amount of equity tied up in it, but their cash flow wasn't always great. Then I looked up Sarah and Mark's recent financial history, also through public sources, bankruptcy filings, etc. It confirmed their struggles were deep. It hit me then, this wasn't just about helping Sarah. This was about my parents using the lake house as a strategic asset. By gifting it to Sarah now, they might have been trying to avoid future estate taxes, or more likely, trying to offload Sarah's financial burden without directly giving her cash, which they might not have had. They used my emotional investment and free labor to maintain the asset, then transferred it to the child they felt needed it more, expecting me to simply accept it, even celebrate it, as a good and dutiful daughter. The thought of my grandfather's bookshelf being torn out, replaced by some trendy decor, was the final straw. I couldn't just stand by. I called a lawyer specializing in property and family law, a woman named Ms. Davies, whose firm had an excellent reputation. I laid out my case, presenting my meticulously compiled binder of receipts, emails, and even a log of major work I'd personally undertaken. I explained the implied understanding, the years of investment. Ms. Davies listened patiently. She explained that while an implied promise was hard to prove in court for the house itself, my documented financial contributions were a different matter. "You have a strong claim for unjust enrichment, Amelia," she said, tapping a pen on my binder. "You significantly improved the property, directly paying for repairs and maintenance that increased its value, under the reasonable assumption of future benefit. Your parents and sister have directly benefited from your investment." She advised against trying to reclaim the house, as the deed was legally transferred. UT suggested sending a formal demand for repayment of my documented contributions. I decided not to attend Sarah's housewarming party. Instead, the day before the party, a certified letter, drafted by Ms. Davies, arrived at my parents' and Sarah's homes. It detailed every dollar I had spent, every repair I had funded, every tax payment I had covered, totaling $45,720. It respectfully requested repayment of this amount within 60 days, citing the principle of unjust enrichment and outlining my intent to pursue legal avenues if a resolution wasn't reached. Along with the lawyer's letter, I sent a personal email to my parents. I wrote it carefully, without anger, but with absolute clarity. "Mom, Dad," I wrote, "I cannot celebrate this. For years, I poured my heart and resources into the lake house, believing it was a shared legacy, and that my efforts were an investment in my future. To have it given away, without discussion, and then to be asked to cheer for it, feels like a deep betrayal of trust. My contributions were not merely gifts, they were made with an understanding of my role in its future. I need you to understand that this isn't about greed, but about respect and fairness. Until this is resolved, I need space." The fallout was immediate and explosive. My mother called, her voice shrill with indignation. "Amelia, how could you? This is blackmail. You're trying to ruin Sarah's fresh start." My father accused me of being cold and calculating, of caring more about money than family. "We thought you were better than this," he said, his voice laced with disappointment. Sarah, surprisingly, was quieter. Her husband, Mark, called me, sounding stressed. He explained that they had no way to pay that kind of money. "We just got this house, Amelia," he pleaded. "We're trying to get back on our feet." I simply reiterated that my request was for repayment of my direct financial contributions, not for the house itself, and that I was open to a payment plan. The family was fractured. My aunt, my mother's sister, called me, not to condemn, but to quietly offer support. She remembered me always being the one at the lake house, always fixing things. "Your parents have always had a blind spot for Sarah, dear," she whispered. "Don't let them make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself." That conversation gave me strength. After weeks of tense phone calls and emails, mostly mediated through Ms. Davies, a resolution was reached. My parents, realizing the legal weight of my claim and fearing a prolonged public dispute, agreed to pay half of the requested amount, and Sarah and Mark, after securing a small loan, agreed to pay the other half, spread out over 2 years. It wasn't perfect, but it was an acknowledgement. The money was a validation, a tangible recognition of my efforts that my family had tried to dismiss. I received the first payment a month later. It felt less like a victory and more like a quiet severing. I didn't visit the lake house again. The old wooden dock, where I'd spent countless hours fishing, swimming, and dreaming, no longer called to me. It was no longer a symbol of home or belonging, but a reminder of what I had lost and what I had chosen to reclaim. I used the money I received to put a down payment on a small plot of land an hour outside the city, where I planned to design and build my own small cabin, my own quiet retreat. It won't have the history, but it will have a future built entirely on my own terms. The lake house, with its familiar dock, now belongs to someone else's story.